The portion of Emor begins with the words, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God speaks to Moses, Emor el HaKohanim b'nei Aaron, speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, V'amarta aleihem, and tell them. In the very first verse we find a double language. First it says Emor, speak to them and tell them. And then V'amarta, again it says, speak to them and tell them. Why do we have this double language in the very first verse of the Parsha? It seems to be redundant. This question is really answered in the very first Rashi. Rashi, the logician on the Torah, that takes the logical approach to the Chumash. Rashi says, Emer V'amarta. He puts these two words together. And he says, what does that mean? Why do we have this double language? Lahazhir gedolim alaktanim, to teach us that the adults should warn the children. In other words, even though, according to Torah law, one is obligated to keep and fulfill the commandments when one becomes either bar mitzvah at the age of 13 or a girl bat mitzvah at the age of 12, here the Torah teaches us that the adults, the parents, and the teachers must warn the children who are under bar mitzvah also to follow the laws of the Torah. So this is the basic concept of this verse. And the question is, what is the meaning of Emor, which is made up of three letters, Aleph, Mem, Reish, and Amarta, which is made up of four letters, Aleph, Mem, Reish, Taf. And how does all of this connect with Lag BaOmer? Many times Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, falls out during the portion of Emor. Lag BaOmer is the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, considered to be one of the greatest works in Kabbalah. And Rashbi said that the day of his passing, which was Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, this day should be a joyous day. Why is this day a joyous day? And why should everybody rejoice in his day, even though normally a person who passes away, people cry over him? And that day, the day of the Yortzeit, is a sad day. Yet Rashbi said, I want you to rejoice in my day, because today, B'chad katina is katana. B'chad katira is katana. With one knot, I become one with God. Today, I create a bond, an everlasting bond, and knot with Almighty God. In other words, I reach my highest pinnacle. I reach my highest level on this very day, because all of the actions and all of the mitzvahs and all of the Torah study that a person does throughout his life comes together on the day of his passing. And so the Rashbi said, on this day, when I become one with God, I want all of you to rejoice in my joy. So how does this connect with the concept of Emor? So we find that the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a book that precedes the Zohar, the Sefer Yetzirah says that when God created the world, He created the world with 32 paths of wondrous wisdom. And then he goes on to say, what are the 32 paths? The 10 levels of the Sfirot, the 10 attributes, and the 22 letters of the Aleph Bet. That is the 32 paths of creation. Now, then the Sefer Yetzirah goes on to say that amongst the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis are divided into three categories. There are the three mothers, the 7 twins, and the 12 singles. So 12 plus 7 plus 3 equals 22, and you have 22 letters of the Aleph base. What are the 3 mothers? The 3 mothers allude to the 3 basic elements of creation, which are Eish, Ruach, and Mayim. And that is fire, water, and air. And these are the 3 elements of creation. Comes along the Ramak in Pardes Rimonim, and he asks a question. The Ramak asks, seemingly we know that there are 4 elements, 4 basic elements in creation, and the 4th is actually earth. So how come the Sefer Yetzirah only mentions 3? And he goes on to give an interesting experiment. He says if you would take a pot of water, go to the local lake and take a pot of water, and then put the pot of water on fire. In other words, you have fire from beneath, and fire needs air to burn. So you have the element of fire and the element of air, and now you have water. And the water boils out. After all the water boils out, what do you have left? You have left these minerals, which are earth, which is the 4th element, the basic element in creation. So really, within 3, you already have the 4th. So this concept, the Rebbe explains, also applies to the double terminology here in the Torah, Emor and Amarta. Emor el Kohanim. Speak to the Kohanim, and then Vamarta, and then tell them that there are 2 elements. Number 1 is to Emor, and then Vamarta. What does that mean? In the word Emor, to speak, you have the letters Aleph, Mem, and Resh. Aleph stands for Eish, which is fire. Mem stands for Mayim, which is water. And Resh stands for Ruach, which is air. So now you have the 3 basic elements. Yet the Torah says it's not enough that you have the 3 basic elements, but also V'amarta, you must tell them. You must have the 4th basic element, and that is the Taf. The Taf is the final letter of the Aleph base. And so the Rebbe explains that the final letter of the Aleph base, this represents the concept of Afar, the concept of earth. And this is true for many reasons. Just like Taf is the final letter, so the final element is also the concept of earth. And in addition to that, the letter Taf is made up of 3 lines and 1 dot. The 3 lines represent thought, speech, and action. And then the dot on the bottom of the Taf represents humility. And the concept is, V'nafshi ka'afar lakil tia, let my soul be like the dust of the earth. So humility is connected with afar, with the concept of earth. And here the Torah is telling us that it's not enough for a teacher and a parent, when they teach their children, to give the child the basic elements of fire and air and water, which represents, by the way, kindness and severity and mercy. It's not enough that we give the child the basic 3 elements, but also V'amarta, we got to give him the earth. We have to give him hands-on. To give an example, if a teacher wants to teach children how to bake a cake, it's not enough that the teacher thought about it, or number 2, talked about it, or number 3, even gave a recipe of how to make the cake. But number 4, the teacher has to sit down with the disciples, hands-on, and show them exactly how to scramble the eggs and how to mix the eggs with the flour and with the chocolate and with the sugar, and how much sugar to put in and how to beat it up and how long to bake it for. You have to go through the motions together with the students. It has to be hands-on. So even though it's true that if you told the children what the recipe is, that eventually they would come to it on their own, but that is not the proper way of teaching. The proper way of teaching is to bring the child and the student through all the motions so that the child understands it well at the very beginning. And so therefore the Torah here gives us a very important lesson in education. It's true we also need Emor, we need the three mothers, which represent the three levels of intellect. And it's also true that we need the concept of fire and water and air, which is that when you teach, it has to be with fire, with emotion, and it has to be done with water, with calmness. It also has to be done with air, with mercy. But at the same time, you must also make sure that you finalize the fourth element, which is earth. To bring it down to earth, it has to be hands-on. When you teach in a way that's hands-on, then v'amarta, you have the ability to convey the message to the student. And therefore Rashi, when he talks about why the Torah says Emor v'amarta, these double terminologies, Rashi doesn't say Emor, speak to the children, and v'chulhu, or v'goymer, etc., and then v'amarta, and tell them. He doesn't put the word etc. after the word Emor, even though in the actual passage there are 4 words after the word Emor to v'amarta. Because according to Rashi, there is no separation between the third element and the fourth element. There has to be one thing. And furthermore, there is no separation and there's no interruption between these 2 words. In other words, no one is exempt from this mitzvah. Every individual, every adult that has a little knowledge in their mind, they are already obligated to teach it to the disciples, and without any interruption. The moment you know it, you have to give it over. You can't say, let me think about it, give me a few years to develop it, then I'll come back and teach it to others. The moment we know something, without any interruption, we have to already convey the message to our colleagues and to our friends and to the youth. And this gives some interesting insight to a statement from the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab says that just like there's a mitzvah to put on tefillin every day, and the mitzvah of putting on tefillin every day is not only for a Torah scholar, but even for one who is very simple, so too there's a mitzvah every single day that one has the obligation to think about the education, the Jewish education of students. Regardless if you're married or not, regardless if you are a parent or not, regardless if you're a great Torah scholar or not, every single day one has the obligation, at least for 1/2 of an hour, to think about the education of children. So the Rebbe very often, when he spoke about this statement, would ask, why did the Rebbe Rashab choose the mitzvah of tefillin? The Torah has 613 commandments. Why does he connect or compare education to the mitzvah of tefillin? So the Rebbe would say that tefillin is placed on the head and on the arms. In other words, when you teach children and when you educate children, it's not enough that you do it intellectually, but also has to be done with your hands, emotionally and hands-on. That's the way you have to convey the teaching. And that's why it's connected specifically with the mitzvah of tefillin. And perhaps we can add to this point by saying that the head is connected to 3 and the hand is connected to 4. The head has within it 3 levels of understanding: chachma, the concept; bina, understanding; and das, a knowledge, which is the prefrontal cortex. The hand has actually 4 parts to it. It has the muscle, the arm, the hand, and then the digits. When it comes to the hand, you have the 4th level as well, which is hands-on, to use your fingers to get the thing done. And when you wrap the tefillin goes all the way down to the fingers. So therefore, when it comes to education, it has to be like tefillin. And that is to use your mind, but also to use your hands, to be hands-on. And then we are fulfilling the obligation of Emor v'amarta, to truly speak to them and then to tell them on both levels, on an intellectual level, but also on a hands-on level. Now this concept studied the week of Lag BaOmer, a day of great joy. And we find that Lag BaOmer, on one level, is even more joyous than Shabbos and Yontif. How do we see this? Because there's a story that a disciple of the Arizal in the late 1500s every day would recite the prayer of Nachem, the prayer that deals with the destruction of the Holy Temple. In other words, every day he would mourn over the destruction of the Holy Temple, and he would ask of God that God rebuild the Holy Temple. So every day he would recite this prayer, even Shabbos and Yom Tif. One year he came up to Meron, the place where the Rashbi is buried, and there in Meron he also recited Nachem. And the Rashbi was very upset with him. And the Rashbi, because of the fact that this student of the Arizal recited Nachem on the day of Lag BaOmer, the Rashbi took it as an affront. And unfortunately, this student was very harshly punished. So what do we see? That even though he said Nachem on Shabbos and Yom Tif, it wasn't such a problem. But he said Nachem on Lag BaOmer, it became a major problem that the Rashbi was very upset about it. So here we see that Lag BaOmer has a level of joy that is even beyond Shabbos and Yom Tif. And what is the theme of the day? The theme of Lag BaOmer is that parents and teachers take their children out of the school and they go into the park and they have parades and they celebrate the joy of being Jewish and the receiving of the Torah. This concept of teachers and students and parents and children celebrating together, the idea of Lag BaOmer, is the message of Emor V'Amarta, which is Lahazhir Gedolim Al Aktanim, that the adults have to teach the youth. And it's interesting to note that the word Lahazhir, even though it's normally translated to mean warn, but really the word Lahazhir is from the same letters as the word Zohar, which is the book of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of the Rashbi. And that is, Zohar means light. How do you teach? You don't teach by warning, but you teach by illuminating. You teach by inspiring. That's the proper way to teach the children. Lahazhir, through light and illumination. So the Rashbi is famous for the teaching on the words Hine Matoi V'Manoyim Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. As the Zohar explains that once there was no rain, there was a drought. And they came to the Rashbi and said, Rashbi, we have no rain. So the Rashbi began to expound upon the verse in Tehillim, in Psalm 133, Hine Matov Umanoyim, how good it is and how pleasant it is. Sheves Achim, when brothers sit together, Gam Yochad, also as one. And as he expounded on this verse, on a Kabbalistic and esoteric level, it began to rain. In other words, that the idea of Sheves Achim, brothers and sisters, and the Jewish people as a whole being united, Gam Yochad as one entity, this is the vessel for God's blessing. And this idea of uniting the people of Israel is primarily the adults and the youth, because we find today terribly a generation gap, that the children are going in one direction and parents are going in another direction. Comes along the day of Lag BaOmer and Rashbi says, celebrate my day together, the adults with the children. Because when the adults and the children are together and they are on the same page, working towards higher inspiration and inspiring one the other, Lahazhir, to illuminate one the other, this is the concept of Jewish unity. And this brings about rain, which represents blessing and kindness and goodness and parnasa and livelihood and sustenance and all the things that we need, that we should be able to live every single day comfortably and serve God with joy. So this is the message of Lag BaOmer, and that is, when you learn something, to inspire someone else. And the Gemara tells us that the Rashbi tells us, or the Talmud tells us, that one can rely on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in a time of difficulty. And our rabbis tell us a time of difficulty means in a time of exile. That in a time of exile we can rely on the greatness of the Rashbi to take us out of this galus, out of this exile. So we hope and pray that as we talk about the Rashbi, and we are now going to soon celebrate the great day of Lag BaOmer, that in the merit of the Rashbi we should be taken out of this galus, of this exile, and to truly see the joy and the light of the Torah, and also the light of the inner dimension of the Torah. With the coming of Mashiach, Amen.
Amen.